Mixed Media Movies.
So today I get to talk Top Gun. In fact, I own the original Top Gun right there. Look at this. Look at this ridiculously awesome, just so everything about this film just screams 80s. It is just an 80s movie through and through. It took me a while to see this film. I bought it on Blu-ray because I am an F-14 sim pilot. So I fly in a sim, this aircraft here. And you can't be an F-14 sim pilot unless you watch this movie and memorize every line. This is a requirement. So, I popped... No, it's not bootleg. I popped this in, and it was a riot from front to back. It is one of the most ridiculous... No, this is not the new movie. This is the original Top Gun. 909 Crime is asking. This is the original Blu-ray, or the original movie in Blu-ray. And it is a riot of a film. It is ridiculous. It is a ridiculous movie from front to back. It has so many gems of lines that I definitely have to... definitely have to go back and memorize. And honestly, I had so much fun watching it, just from the absurdity and the ridiculousness of this movie. It is a not good movie, objectively. Like, it's really not good. But, I gave it a 2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. It's not even really average. It's not really that great. But it's freaking great, and how much joy you can have watching such a ridiculous movie. And I'm not talking about from the sim pilot perspective. I mean, it's ridiculous in that sense in a whole another set of ways, but just in general for a blockbuster movie, it is on the more ridiculous half of things. Now, what is this movie? Why is this movie so jovial, so joyful? It's because there's so much energy in it. Like, for all of its flaws, it does not lack energy. Like, all the actors are firing on all cylinders, just being as hammy as possible, with all the charisma they've got. Tom Cruise is just the most smiley, affable person. He's always smiling, flashing those grins. He's got his aviator glasses on. It's ridiculous. It's awesome. Now, this is also very obviously a piece of propaganda, like, to join the Navy. It's like literally a Navy, recruitment film, might as well be. Clearly the message of this film is, if you become a naval pilot, you will get all the girls, and you will have the cool missions, and maybe your friend will die, but it's okay because, it's just an overall fun experience. You get to play volleyball. It's just so summertime in California. It's ridiculous, but in the best ways possible. I have no shame in owning this thing. As an F-14 pilot, it is even better because of it. The amazing thing, though, is that and this is going to tie into the new film. The one incredible thing about this film, and this ties into a topic I talked about a long time back about military funding of films, is that this is actual Tomcats flying in all of these shots. That boggles my mind. That boggles my mind in the new film too, but we'll get to that. It's incredible, even though it's ridiculous, to see F-14s being filmed in choreographed shots, doing sometimes quite risky maneuvers. I'm watching it, I'm like, yikes, that's scary. And it's all for a shot, they're willing to risk these airframes just to get their nice advertisement for the Navy going. But it's worth it. But it has charisma. It has a lot of problems. It's a very incoherent story. To give you, if you haven't seen it, have you guys seen Top Gun?
I haven't, no.
I watched a 5-minute summary of it before going to see the second one, so
yeah, it didn't really miss much.
It's pretty much covered in the second film anyway.
That's true too. Just to give you an idea of what kind of film this is, this film basically revolves around this gung-ho pilot who just likes to push the boundaries. Basically, do things that if you did them once, you'd be kicked out of the Navy immediately. But that's okay. He, is a hot shot, gets the babes, all that kind of stuff. But just to give you an idea of what kind of movie this is, they're in a real. This is a real thing. Top Gun is a real competition that the Navy holds to sort of dogfighting exercises, and there's a winner. Like, it actually does work like that, and I believe it still works the same way it did back then. Oh, rules could be different, but same general principles. However, this film adds the extra spice of some unnamed foreign entity that is very clearly Russian, but unnamed. They call them MiGs, so I don't even understand why they don't name them. Yeah, I mean, they call the aircraft MiGs.
Is it actually Russia? My dad, so he knows much more about this, and he told me that it's pretty obvious it's supposed to be Libya, but I could be wrong.
Interesting. Okay, I could actually see that's an interesting take. I could see that because the Libya might have had MiGs at the time. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's interesting. Huh, I didn't think about that. But in any case, it's weird that they name the enemy aircraft, but they don't name a country. It's just kind of bizarre. But anyway, they are getting invaded at random by enemy MiGs in the middle of their Top Gun exercises. I kid you not. This is the plot. Like, they are literally doing their Top Gun competition, and all of a sudden they'll be like, 2 bogeys in the distance. I'll be like, what? Like, are you practicing in the middle of, like, a theater of war here? Like, what are you doing? It is incredible, though. And the MiGs, of course, the big pilots are dressed in all black. They literally look like, like they belong in Star Wars. Like, they've got the red accents and everything. It's ridiculous. It's incredible. So, do I recommend buying it? Absolutely. This is a museum piece. Like, this is required ownership, just for the sake of having it. Okay, now to the new film. Oh, actually, one thing I noticed when I was picking up this disc to show you guys is at the back, one of the featurettes is survival training featurette. I have not seen it. I'm definitely going to watch it soon now that I've noticed that that's there. That sounds like it'll be hilarious. Okay, so now the new film. So, of course, we are many, many, many years later. In fact, we're decades later from the original film. Tom Cruise has gotten older, much older. Perhaps the first time he's acknowledged in a film that he's gotten older. I feel like in his Mission Impossible series, he's just kind of still this nice, ripe, like 40 age perpetually. But in this film, he actually feels, actually aged, like he's actually aged. Now, he's definitely done up so that he looks nice and clean and all that kind of stuff. But he's sort of taking on that his age sort of head first. And just to give you a non-spoiler overview, basically, Maverick, which is Tom Cruise's call sign. I think his name in the film is like Peter something or another. I can't remember, but we call him Maverick, of course. And Captain Maverick is still a captain. After all these years, he's now a naval test pilot, testing the new platforms that the Navy is going to be doing. We get this really, I haven't looked it up. As an aviation nerd, I'm surprised I haven't jumped on it yet. But the weird, Mach 10 aircraft, I have no idea if that thing is real. It doesn't look real at all, but, I mean, it could be. I just don't know. So I thought that was an interesting thing. Hypersonic manned flight sounds a little bit odd as a concept, but cool nonetheless. Very cool. And so, he's a test pilot, who's called back to Top Gun, of course. Listen, Maverick, you're going back to Top Gun. That kind of thing. He's going back to Top Gun so that he can teach a new class of spunky, spry aviators to have discipline and to do a really tough mission with an even more vague target. Because now there's not only not named adversary, there's not a named aircraft either. So,
again, my father, who's much more in tune with all this, the military, his commentary on it was that it bears a lot of resemblance to a particular mission in Iran. Not carried out by the U.S., but Iran doesn't
Israel.
have the plane. Yeah, but Iran doesn't have the planes that are used by the unnamed enemy. It also doesn't have the shoreline that this enemy has.
Yes, I thought it was very obviously Iran as well. Like when I was, in terms of the reference to the particular mission, it felt very like Israel dropping a pair of GBUs on Iranian reactors way back when. It's way more complicated than that mission, than the Israeli mission. Way more difficult than the Israeli mission. Not to say the Israeli mission wasn't difficult. This one is quite the time, but we'll get to it. So basically, I'll start with the cons first. Then I'll go to the pros, and then I'll talk about just as a sim pilot and an amateur, aviation nerd. I'll go over some of those things in there.
Before you start, I do have to be heading out now, sadly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, see you guys later.
See you later. And I'm not going to do my best not to spoil it, although there's not really, it's a very, just like the original, it is very formulaic in its overall form. You could tell what was going to happen at the end from the beginning, of course. That's not to its detriment per se. It's just, it is what it is. It's following that formula. Well, it could be to its detriment. We'll get to it. Actually, I'll give my overall assessment first, and then we'll get into the particulars, because the particulars is where the interesting stuff is at. So I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5, right? In a way, it is better than this film. In a lot of ways, I should say. It is much better than this film in a lot of ways. And 3 out of 5 is above average for me. So there's the sort of what it is factor, of course, right? So you can't just compare all 3 out of 5s together. This film's not trying to be a Scorsese film or something like that. It's not of that echelon, so I'm not going to hold it to that standard either. It's supposed to be a fun blockbuster movie. So in that context, I give it a 3 out of 5. And so overall, it was a positive experience for me. I'll discuss the details now, I guess. Here's where we insert the details. So I'll start with the cons and then go to the pros. So the cons, I was really surprised that Tom Cruise felt a little flat for me the entire time. I don't know if it's just because I had watched Top Gun a month beforehand, and I saw his young self as Maverick, and that's still fresh in my memory, and then I see his old self as Maverick. But I feel like there could have been a decision made where his age could have given him something instead of the spunk, but I feel like it just removed the spunk, if that makes sense. So it's just like Maverick minus spunk, and it just kind of felt kind of blank. And I like Tom Cruise, so it just felt a little bland to me. And then the film kind of suffers from a little bit of that second act slump that I've talked about many times on this show for films that are the traditional Hollywood 3-act structure.
I definitely concur with that. It's
particularly Act 2B, if you use the Act 2B? No, sorry, Act 2A. Act 2A is the particularly offensive act in this film, if you're going by the original, by the way it was certainly constructed. Now, it's kind of odd, because it's hard for me to assess it for this fault, because it's very clearly trying to do the same thing the original film did, beat by beat. It's like a remake, but not a remake. Like the beats are hit almost exactly in the same spots of the screenplay. We've got a different overall tone and dynamic, but it's almost a halfway remake, halfway sequel in the way that the story structure is, the way it evolves. In that sense, it's like the original had the same exact problem. So if we're trying to line up the beats so that they're the same, we're going to exhibit the same symptom, right? So it's I don't know. It's hard for me to... I still find it a flaw. I don't find it redemptive to take the flaws of the prior thing and then just copy it over to the new one. I don't think that's helpful, but I understand why it happened, I suppose. And why is Act 2A bad? It's because, okay, actually, I should say this. Act 2A in the original film is better. And the reason why it's better in the original film is because there's just so much energy that it doesn't matter that we've gone off track and we don't know where we are in the story. We have no connection to any themes. We've gone nowhere. There's no interesting action. At least we've got the spunk. We've got the young Tom Cruise. We've got his love interest who's got tons of charisma. She's super awesome to watch, even though her role was literally just to be the love interest. She was literally just love interest. And I thought she was going to have a wider role in the entire film. She doesn't even have a plot-related role. But we spent Act 2A with her out of nowhere. Just so we can have, the pilot getting the girl.
How do you feel like that compares to the love interest in the second film, though? To me, that was like the most extraneous part of the film. It didn't even if you were going to just put it in there, just because you want your main character to get the girl. I mean, it's not even like a spicy intense romantic thing. It's like the romance itself is pretty flat.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. So that's why I said the Act 2A and the original is better, because there's actual chemistry between Tom Cruise and the actress who played I forget her name, who played the character originally. Now, in this film, the actress is different for aging reasons. It's a whole other topic.
I think the original actress is dead.
Oh, she really? Oh, okay. Oh, I missed that detail. Sorry about that. Okay, well, so we have a replacement who has no charisma in comparison and really zero chemistry. I don't even know how when they play tested Tom Cruise against this woman, I have no idea what they were thinking when they were like, yeah, this is a good idea. She comes across, and I'm not saying this is her fault, because she's given such a one-dimensional role, so she has to play with it herself in order to make it interesting. And if there's no chemistry, then that might be very, very difficult for her to do. So I'm not blaming her. But I just don't. I mean, she makes her feel like a Hallmark character. That's really what she felt like a Hallmark love interest.
I thought her daughter was better than she was, and her daughter has 2 lines.
Oh, absolutely! The daughter was fun compared to the weirdness that was happening between Tom Cruise and the love interest here. So, we brought in that extraneous love plot from the first film, brought it back to do it worse, and I was just like, okay, can we just move on to the action that we all want to see? We all know why we're here. We want to see planes. That's what we want to see. And it ended up not affecting the wider plot either this time around either. So I was like, okay, nothing was changed. So yeah, quite didn't like that aspect. And the film could have been shorter because of it. That's the other thing that bothered me. Is it could have been tighter in general. But that's the problem that these sort of 3-act typical structure films tend to have, is they just don't have the tension at all times. It's a problem. The other complaint I had is that there was not enough Rooster. And I'll get into the Rooster because that's a gigantic pro on the flip side of this thing. The central core theme of this film is perfect for this kind of movie. It is simple, yet archetypal, right? So it can achieve a lot of depth without having to be very deep on its own, right? Because the audience is familiar with these sorts of things. These are very raw human things. So you don't have to do much work to pull interesting things out of it. You just got to present it as it is, which is this sort of complicated father-son dynamic that has, emerged after, because he feels responsible for the death of his father. That's in Top Gun 1, who was his RIO, his rear instruments officer, something like that. I'm going to mess it up. His RIO, his backseat. And, he feels responsible for that. That's a great theme. That's awesome. It's obviously been done many times before, but let's do it again with planes. Fine, I'm down for it. Let's do it fun. Let's have some fun with it. But there wasn't enough of it. It should have been from front to back. That should have been the core thing from every scene should have been hitting a theme that's related to this. And that was the weird part, because we ended up exploring half a theme that was in the original which is, what is the role of discipline? Is being a maverick a good thing, right? Like a literal maverick, right? Is being a maverick a good thing, right? And you can see he has to learn a lesson about discipline in the original film so that he can use his maverick nature to the best of its ability, constrain it, right? This is like a very archetypal message again, like particularly in sort of those masculine archetypes, right? It's like chaining the monster, right? Like, chaining it so that you can control it, right? This is archetypal stuff. With this film, we get a little bit of it still, which I thought was weird because I was like, but he's old now and he's already chained the monster, like that's
It's also confusing, not confusing. I think it muddies what's going on because we have Rooster and like the whole, parental, like that issue. We have what you're talking about, like, the discipline versus recklessness in Maverick, the character, but we also have that in the guy, I think his name is Hangman, the other pilot, and like, and Hangman like hates Rooster, and they have like their own fight going on, and it's like it's kind of muddying like what's going on. Like I was a little confused too. I'm like, we had too many like rivalries going on, and they're not all like as developed as they ought to be. Yeah, it's all going on like three different planes.
Yeah, no pun intended. Yeah. I agree entirely. There's all distraction. I think it's because they're trying to make Rooster Maverick, like in terms of fitting it to the same exact, in the remake aspect of this film, they're trying to make Rooster Maverick, which means Maverick needs to have his class rival, so we give him Hangman. Like, but the thing is, we're following Maverick still. So it ends up being very bizarre feeling, overall, because it's like, what's the central point? What's the central conflict? With a blockbuster film, oftentimes there's just one or two central conflicts, like conflict A and sub-conflict, B. Here it was just kind of like, okay, but we're not even latching onto anything. It's kind of weird. So again, writing issues from the jump. Let's see. So there's that. The last complaint I have is color grading. Oh my gosh. I have never seen... this is the first time okay. Sometimes I have like more subjective opinions about color and how I don't like certain decisions, but I understand that they were decisions made, and maybe it's just not my cup of tea, right? Or maybe I just don't understand what the director was going for, right? And I typically don't have that much to say about color, and if I do, it's usually positive, So it's really bizarre in this film. The color was just weird throughout, from front to back. Really odd color grading. They had like weirdly yellowed skin sometimes when we're in the dark. Like the any indoor shot that was super lit felt so stale in the color grading. Now I want to show you the cover again of Top Gun. This film's color it's colorful. It's a colorful movie. Like the original Top Gun feels like summer. It's a summer blockbuster, and it's just colorful. And I don't know why. I feel like the trend in a lot of blockbuster films is just to get darker for no reason, right? And okay, I personally have lots of dark concepts, right? Dark is not foreign to me. I like dark. But when it's time to have fun, it's time to have fun. Like, just put some color in your movie. What were you going to say, Ben?
I was going to say, that was one of the arguing with Reddit things I gave you a couple weeks ago about, films getting darker. So if you want to see Irving develop his thoughts on that, I'm sure that's out there somewhere under I'm sure you can look up that title somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I don't even care that it's a trend. I just care when you use it in places where it's just like, why? Like, why is Top Gun Maverick a dark movie? Like, I don't, like, in terms of color, I'm speaking. It's not even like it's dark. It's a little darker than Top Gun in terms of its themes, of course, but it's not like hugely darker, such that the color has to reflect like some sort of depression or something like that. Like it's not that at all. So like, we could just have fun with it.
It's not Blade Runner.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, and the thing is, they decided to do this film entirely digital and just to run with the digital look, which for the airplane sequences, which I'll get to, it's a huge pro. Works totally fine. The practical nature of it is that they probably had to do the airplane sequences in digital just to get that much better at the cinematography than in the original movie. However, the ground scenes, come on, you want this. You want the colors, the skin tone does not look like this on digital. It never can, it never will. Skin tones just look poppy, beautiful, alive. They jump off of the screen, on film. And in the original Top Gun, you get that beautiful film grain. You've got that beautiful blooming happening. It's part of the brand, in my opinion, to shoot this thing on film. So what I would have loved to see is to see the grounds, anything that was not in air, to be in film, and for film emulation to happen while they were in the air. You can match things, especially when you don't, looking at digital long sequences, you can fool people pretty easily, and things blend pretty nicely these days. Like, you can blend them pretty nicely. So all the scenes where we have talking heads out in, California and the vistas and all that kind of stuff, or in the offices of some bureaucratic place, they all could have gotten that characteristic of film to them that is so, I feel like, a part of this schlocky thing. Like, it's part of it, It's inseparable. Yeah. And so I just don't understand the color decision and this decision to go entirely digital. I don't think it'll ever make sense to me. So that's it for the cons. I could nitpick things here and there, but this is not that type of movie, right? Like, we're not going to talk about, the 3 layers of motif that it could have had and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to talk about that because this is supposed to be a fun, stupid movie. So, okay, pros. Biggest pro, and this will kind of lead into a con I forgot, but biggest pro. Cinematography in general. So strip the colorist away, just ignore the colorist for a moment, and just look at how the shots were taken. Phenomenal work, I think, in terms of shooting these real planes. I'm still baffled that it happens that way. We've got my poor old Tomcat is not taking the forefront anymore, and my big, beautiful, beastly F-14 is no longer the star of the show. We've got the Super Hornet, the FA-18s, which I'm not a big fan of, but that's a rant for not this this venue. We've got the Super Hornets, the FA-18s that took the Tomcat job away from them, sort of taking the forefront. Now, the first shots are carrier operations, which immediately I thought was cool. I was like, yeah, we're on the carrier. We could see some carrier operations. I'm a nerd. And the weird thing is the plane that's coming off the character, I'm pretty sure is an F-35, which is a 5th generation American fighter, right? It's top of the line, top of the class. We've got we're still producing these things to put them on carriers, whatever. They're pretty cool. Their nickname though is Fat Amy because they kind of look a little round compared to the fighters of prior generations. And the reason it's Amy is because the voice of the plane is a woman. So of course pilots gave her the name Fat Amy, and it was interesting because I was like, oh, are there going to be F-35s prominently displayed in this movie? Because that would be super cool because, new generation fighters, seeing those fly around would be super cool. Then we got this weird plot armor about not using the F-35s, which was the F-18s, it was something about jamming and stealth fighters, which was just kind of jargon nonsense that was thrown in there to say we're using F-18s, we're not using the F-35s. So I was super happy to see the F-35 on the carrier operations. I don't trash on the F-35 as much as the F-18, but F-35 is it's okay, but it's cool because it's new. So I was happy about that. So seeing the carrier operations was awesome for that, and then the plane just doesn't appear again until it becomes the enemy, which was interesting. I'm not sure why the choice was made to do the carrier operations of the F-35 in the opening shot and then make it the enemy for the remainder of the film. But okay, that's a little weird, but whatever. It's cool. That's all I'm saying is all the cinematography is just cool. QOOL, cool stuff. The effects that these planes are having on their surroundings is a huge improvement on the original film. In the original film, a lot of the cinematography is coming from the ground, shooting up at the sky, or from hills or mountains, shooting up at the action, and you can tell that they're keeping a nice, healthy ground clearance for safety purposes, right, in terms of the practical nature of shooting it. This film, I have no idea. I mean, so what they talked about in this film was not going below the hard deck, right? So that's a real thing. The hard deck is usually a defined altitude that you can't go below for safety purposes in case your engines go out or like some emergency happens. You have more altitude to give up before you're in true danger. The hard deck is a real thing. The funny thing is, though, to shoot it, they had to violate the hard, like, there was no hard deck, clearly, for shooting it. Because, like, there were these shots, I was shook. Like, you have FA-18s passing over the crew at, like, I don't know, a few hundred feet. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm not complaining, though, because there were awesome shots, so no complaints from me. And as far as I know, no one got hurt, so that's fine with me. Awesome stuff. The motion of the camera and the placing of the planes in the composition, tons better, tons more controlled than the first film. In the first film, you got these really hokey, like, the film's just kind of seesawing around, the planes seesawing around each other, kind of doing this motion, where they just kind of do weird turny things and just kind of do this, and to show that they're fighting each other, which looks hilarious. In this film, you actually had, like, proper large maneuvers that were sometimes recognizable. You had a little bit more separation between the subject plane and the enemy plane in the background. For whatever reason, in the original film, they felt the need that the enemy plane had to be right up against the I don't know if they just didn't think people would get that ranged weapons are a thing. I don't know. But, you had this like weird just closeness in the first film. In this film, it's still way weirdly close to my pilot's eyes, but at least it looked a little bit more natural, I think, in general, to have the planes a little bit more separated. The angles for the cockpits were tons better. You had a much wider angle inside the cockpit, and you got a much bigger breadth of what it feels like to be in that cockpit. And the actors in the cockpit getting tossed, experiencing G's, there is nothing you could do to simulate that, like, other than actually just, I mean, of course they could act it, but it would not look the way it does in this film otherwise. It looks ridiculous. Like, there's a scene where one of the characters G-locks, which means that he passes out because when you're pulling G's, right, usually when you're changing angle, right, when you're pulling G's, your blood is literally being removed from your brain. It's an interesting thing. And so eventually you pass out from lack of blood in your brain. That's called G-lock, and you go all floppy. It's really physiological. If you go on YouTube and you look up G-locking, it would be almost impossible to act that, or I would say impossible to act. You would hurt yourself trying to act it. I don't know. It's just a weird. But in this film, there's a character who G-locks, and it looks so real. I have no idea whether they G-locked this guy or not. I want to know. If someone knows, let me know in the comments. It looked entirely real, him G-locking. His one eye rolled back a little bit, and then he goes slumped entirely. It was so real, I was actually concerned while I was watching it. I was like, what? Now, for regular civilians, their G tolerance is going to be a lot lower than if you're a trained pilot. So a trained pilot, the rule of thumb is like, they tend to pass out if they're really concentrating and really trying hard, and it's not too long of a G load, around 8 to 9 Gs, right? So 8 to 9 Gs, something like that. And if you sustain that, that'll eventually pass out anyway. This guy, regular civilians without much training, you're going to have to train them somewhat because you don't want them to pass out, at random. But, if you train them a little bit and they don't have the muscle and the overall stamina, I've seen people pass out doing maneuvers in civilian aircraft at like something like 4G very easily. So that's a big disparity. So what I'm thinking they might have done, which would be insane, is that they pulled like something like 4Gs to pass the actor out, and the pilot could withstand that 4Gs who's actually flying the plane, and it was fine. And if you didn't know, they used the two-seater version of the F-A-18, and certainly in all the shots, the person who's flying is the actual fighter pilot, and they put the actor in the back seat or in the front seat, because I think the F-A-18 has the Rio in the F-A-18 actually has a joystick, I believe. Don't quote me on that. That's my hypothesis. If someone knows, I would love to know the actual answer, because I thought that was insane watching it. Ben looks really concerned. He'll be fine. The unrealistic part of that, to preview the sort of realism talk, the unrealistic part of that is that he stays in G-lock for an extended period of time, whereas the moment the G load would be released is the moment his consciousness would, I mean, it might take a few seconds, but it's not usually like a long, pass out session, because usually once you release what's what I'm looking for, the G load. Once you release the G load, then you've released the pressure pulling your blood down, and now it springs all the way back up into your brain, which can be quite the sensation apparently. And and you come to again. Whether or not it's good for you is a different question to be doing over and over again. I have no idea, but pilots do that on a regular basis. So that was a big pro was the cinematography. The second pro, and I sort of mentioned, is the stunt work. There's a scene at the end, and I'm not going to say what it is. Rooster is in the Rio position of something. I really want to talk about it, but I feel like this is an important feature of the hurrah of the end. But he's in the back seat, and he's getting tossed around the back seat as the aircraft is maneuvering. Apparently, the set story is that was actually an accident. He was not strapped in enough for that scene to his flight chair. So he's a little loose. So he was getting tossed around like a sardine in the can, and they kept the take. And honestly, he didn't look like he was in any danger, I don't think. But certainly that added to the intensity of the final scene, and I consider that to be stunt work, and that was phenomenal. It was crazy to watch him getting ragdolled around the aircraft. It really gives you a sense of what feeling forces in such a machine actually is, especially that machine. Anyway, needless to say, much more intense than the original machine. So that was really cool. And then the overall realism was well increased over this hokey thing. This thing, nothing in here about the military aspects or the aviation, nothing makes sense. It's just ridiculous. It's just absurd. The coolest part is seeing the real aircraft. In this film, there's a lot of ridiculousness, but it's the kind of ridiculousness that's forgivable if you know things about things. You're still going to just pass it off and just say, yeah, I'll accept that, that sort of thing. And what I mean is they're always at least trying to reach for the right stuff. So when they're shooting missiles away, they're using generally the correct terminology. When the comms to each other is way improved over this thing, where it's I don't know, you get just beautifully horrible lines, I don't know, can't think of one off the top of my head, but you get get that guy off by 6 or something, I don't know, it's just ridiculous stuff. But in this film, there's a lot of communications that felt a lot more natural, a lot more realistic. Not to say that it's realistic, period, but it just felt a lot more natural because of it leaning a little bit more into the realism, which allowed, I think, a better experience of the intensity of the combat. It just a little bit more absorbing, into the whole combat. There's stuff, the mission, the central mission of the film, which is, part of the premise of the film, so I'm not spoiling anything, which is essentially, this weird, bowl in the middle of a mountain range with, the idea that someone puts a shaft there and that's ridiculous.
Just the end of A New Hope.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. Yeah, that's exactly correct. I thought about that when I was watching it. I was like, oh, I've seen this before. But they have to. So the premise is kind of ridiculous. The idea that there's this shaft in the mountain range, and you have to drop the bombs in the shaft. The animation for that was funny. Like it was like literally like, yeah, you just kind of fit the bomb into this really narrow shaft that's the size of the bomb. And then, it'll go inside and explode the whole thing. That's ridiculous. However, if you take that, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, also there's the whole point, like where Maverick is like, don't think, do. I'm like, are we not literally pulling from Star Wars here?
That's true. I didn't think about that. That's so true. That's so true. Oh boy. Yeah. So the premise that this is the target is ridiculous. However, if you accept this as the premise, that this is what needs to happen, that you have a defended target in the middle of this bowl of a mountain, and you have a valley that leads up to this bowl, the resulting mission is not patently ridiculous. It's patently ridiculous in that no one would try it, but it's not patently ridiculous in that the strategy that they come up with, if they had to try it, is actually not ridiculous, if that makes sense. So something like this would never be defended that way, ever. Think about the cost of putting one conscript in the valley to just keep watch every 5 miles. Like it doesn't cost you anything to keep an eye of inside the valley. So that concept was a little bit ridiculous. But so I should explain. So basically they have to take their F-18s, which apparently is the only plane that can do this weird concept. But they take their F-18s, and they have to zigzag at 660 knots, which is really fast, but certainly plausible, I should say. To maintain that speed the entire time is probably implausible. But, without that detail, it's plausible. Fast for the F-18, I should say. It's not fast for the Tomcat. That would be light work for the Tomcat, but that's a whole other topic. And it's got to do these weaving motions through the valley. Now, when they presented this, I didn't think I thought that might be a little bit of a boring concept to the audience, when I know as a pilot that that's actually really intense. That's really scary, flying. I'm not a pilot. I say it as if I'm not a real pilot. I've never been in a fighter plane. When I say that, take me with a grain of salt. I am an amateur sim pilot. But, I've certainly, taken my sim F-14 down into valleys and tried to weave like that at as fast as I can. And it is very intense. Now, you add to it the fact that there are forces involved in real life that are tossing you from side to side. And in these turns, they did a very good job displaying that you're pulling G's every time. Because I think if you got a top-down view of the whole thing, it could easily escape you that those turns are intense. All of them are intense because you're going so fast that even a slight turn, you might be pulling a solid 4 Gs every turn. Even though it looks like a slight turn from above, you're going so fast that those turns contain quite a bit of positive Gs. So having the actors experiencing those Gs as they were actually running the course, and those real fighter pilots were pulling the Gs for these actors, it was phenomenal to see because it added that bite into the mission that on its face didn't necessarily have to be there, right? From the audience perspective, an unknowing eye, right? I thought that was really cool. And then you've got this mountain you've got to pull hard up, and then you've got to flip over and go down into the bowl, have your buddy laze the target, and while you drop the laser-guided bombs, which are GPUs. Now, the flipping over thing, I thought was really cool, because that's actually, there's no other way to do it. At that speed, you're going 660 knots, and you've got to pull up, and you've got to come over the crest. Humans are better at dealing with positive Gs, not negative Gs. So if you were to go over the hump regularly, just like that, facing upwards, you would have the the blood rushing into your brain, which would kill you at that speed, easily kill you. So flipping over so that you flip the G's so that's draining the blood out of your brain is complete sense, which I thought was super cool. That they added that detail in instead of having to VFX a ridiculous thing where they should be flying out of their seat and dying doing. Now, lasing the target that quickly is probably impractical, but if you try hard enough, and you just believe in the spirit of Maverick. I guess it's possible. And the whole buddy system, when one drops the bomb, that's actually how FA-18s do laser-guided bombing, not in this circumstance, but, you'll have a buddy lasing a target, and you'll have the FA-18 dropping the laser-guided bombs, his buddy dropping the actual bomb. So I thought these little details here were just really well appreciated. I really well appreciated them. And you have the 10G pull-up, which is stupid, because none of these people would actually be awake after pulling 10 Gs for remotely the amount of time that they're pulling 10 Gs. They would all be G-locked at the end, even if you're the best pilot in the world. They sustain the Gs for like a solid 10 seconds. You would be passed out. But as a concept, it was cool. So I just translated 10 Gs to 9 Gs and made it work in my head. So the general concept is not ridiculous. And then them pulling out and reaching the SAM net where they're in the radar sphere, that's realistic. Radars don't work well when they're pointing down. However, there would be certainly some soldiers down there with some IR missiles and other things, but that's a whole other thing. With some handheld rocketry, but that's a whole other thing. But I thought the two bogies that were introduced, what were actually F-35s, the enemy aircrafts, they were actually American aircraft, pretending to be enemy aircraft, the fifth generation fighters.
I was going to say, are they actually? Because I read that they're supposed to be fifth generation MiGs, but I couldn't tell you what they look like. So
I can imagine that they're trying to be that, but I think what they did exactly what they did in the original film, where they used, so in the original film they call them MiGs, but they're actually F4s, so they're actually also American aircraft, and they do that so they can actually use the real aircraft because they're not going to fly. The military has a few captured MiGs, but they don't have, obviously, stores and stores of MiGs to be using. So I assume that was the same thing here, because the fifth generation fighters generally have the same shape, because they're all stealth fighters, whether they're Russian or American. They generally have that sort of fat, sort of bodied and weird angular sort of shape to them. So I think it's pretending to be a new generation Russian fighter, but I think it actually was an F-35. But at the same time, I'm not very well adept in fifth generation fighters, so maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so that was really cool to see them scramble and interdict the team. I thought that was inevitable. I was like, this would obviously happen, right? And then it happened. I was like, okay, that would obviously happen, right? That was really cool. The combat that happens after that a lot of it is very good if you shrink the battlefield down to the size that it would be. And I get why they do that for cinematography and, filmmaking purposes. You take what would probably be a battle that would span a square mile easily. And honestly, much bigger than a square mile probably, in terms of them dogfighting each other. These are very fast jets. They've got very long-range missiles. I mean, the Tomcat, the original aircraft, has a bomb interceptor missile that can shoot out easily 60 nautical miles. So, that's old. That's an old aircraft. So, if you have, these sort of new airplanes, the battlefield would be much bigger, in short. However, the resulting combat, if you were to give it that grace, that, okay, the combat area has shrunken, and you give them the good plot armor that they gave the FA-18s, that they did not have long-range missiles because they had to be as light as possible, which is realistic. That does happen where bombing missions, you don't take long-range air-to-air missiles because your store weight and aerodynamic properties really does matter tremendously. Just bringing the bombs and your laser pod is definitely realistic, and then only carrying a few sidewinders for close air-to-air, totally realistic, totally plausible. So I liked that aspect of things. The dogfighting, they really made a big deal out of fifth generation in terms of you guys would all definitely die. I mean, it was kind of 6-2. And I was kind of like, well, 6-2, you definitely have plenty of chance. You might actually stomp them. So, but so that was a cool thing watching the ensuing battle. That was really cool. And that whole last act was, honestly, if the whole film was the last act, this film would be easily a 4 out of 5, just on the action alone. Because the action at the end is really bracing, catching, and surprisingly realistic for what it is. Well, except one thing that happens that I can't spoil. That's just absurd. But I loved it because I loved it. There's a certain reprisal that happens that just is ridiculous. But
you have to tell me what that is.
Okay. Should I spoiler, people? Spoiler. It's honestly, it's not that important, because none of this film has any plot points that are that important. Okay. But spoiler. The F-14 makes a reprisal at the end. The Tomcats makes a reprisal at the end where there's just a Tomcat for no named reason. There's one Tomcat in this airfield. They had tomahawked from the freaking carrier, which is possible. Although that made me have questions as to why they didn't just tomahawk the facility. But that aside, that tomahawk barrage was totally realistic. The mission, in terms of, well, it didn't look realistic, but it's plausible. It destroying the runways and stuff and being a base attack is plausible. The F-18's calling it in is plausible, although they used the wrong word. You're supposed to say fire mission. This is something else weird. That was all good. But out of all the wreckage, of course, in one hangar, there is the Tomcat. I was like, oh, okay. That's so absurd, patently absurd. But I was all for it. I was like, that's my plane. Get back in it. I want to see it. I'm here for it. The ridiculous thing is that they eject from their original aircraft, which is quite the experience, by the way. Always in movies, ejecting is presented as almost like you're just dropping out of like an escape hatch. Ejecting is really intense. People actually get shorter after they eject. Like, they get actually measurably shorter because they're getting crushed into themselves because they pull like instantaneous G's of like something like 12 G's or something like that, or 15 G's instantaneous. Of course that's only for like a second or two. It's enough to make you shorter though. So ejecting is not very fun. The Air Force and Navy have a rule that you're only allowed to eject, I think, 2 or 3 times before you get decommissioned. So yeah, it's very intense. Thing to do, and it's not something you do lightly, although that's how the movies always present it. And so they eject, and they of course are magically within walking distance from the airbase that got fire missioned. And of course the only plane that's there is the Tomcat, and of course they're able to just walk across the base, no soldier in sight. And just open the canopy. Ridiculous. And of course it's just ready to go. Like, it's got missiles on the rails. It's just ready to, it's got fuel already. It's like it's already ready to go. It's already connected to ground power. All they have to do is because the Tomcat's old, it needs ground power and ground air to start up. And it's already connected already. All I have to do is he has to show Rooster how to flip the switch to turn it on. And then then conveniently there's a barrel on the side for the Rio to get up into the Rio seat so that he can jump into the Rio seat. I was just like, this whole thing is so contrived and ridiculous. However, that is the kind of hokiness that makes these films really fun. It's just stupid. And then, of course, the point of them tomahawking the airbase is to destroy the runway so that enemy aircraft can't take off. This is a realistic proposition. But of course, the only thing that's left is the taxiway. It's completely untouched. There's debris everywhere else except the taxiway. The taxiway is completely fine. And I was like, okay. That's okay. We're doing that. For reference, you can't take off taxiways if they're long enough. That was a really short taxiway, but of course with the power of Maverick, and if you just believe, you can take off of short taxiways if you want to. And now that I'm spoiling it, the F-14, in terms of its general flight dynamics, its power to weight ratio, its turning abilities, everything about it is superior to 5th gen fighters, even though it's ancient, right? They call it a flying museum. And I was sitting there, I was like, but you guys, this flying museum actually kicks butt. Now, it's deficient in a lot of other ways. Namely, it's expensive. That was the biggest problem with the Tomcat. It was expensive to maintain, and it's a huge airplane. 2 F-18s could probably fit in a hangar compared to one F-14. So the Navy had this proposition of basically, do we have double the cheaper planes, or do we bring in a new generation of the old sort of power doctrine of the F-14s? I have opinions about that. That's for another day. But the F-14 is a monster. And I loved it kicking those fifth generation fighters' butt in the only way that it would, which is in that close quarters sort of what we call a knife fight sort of range. And it was great. And the thing is, it wasn't completely unreasonable in the sense that the way the planes were originally positioned, which were stupid, the fifth generation planes were just like escort. It was an escort formation, so in that sense, it's not stupid. But given that you're in the middle of a war zone, I don't think you would be assuming escort formation for something you're suspicious of. You'd probably back off and lock it up just in case it does something funny, if you were really that unsure. However, they just sort of decide to, have escort formation around the F-14, and then you get this funny moment where, Tom Cruise is pretending to understand the signaling of the hand signals of the other aircraft. Played well with the audience that I was in. And then he decides that he's going to engage these guys. I think Rooster said something stupid like, oh, these are fifth generation aircraft. I was like, okay, but in the position you're in, it's actually not that bad. And he veers off and guns down the one that's to his side, completely reasonable because that idiot put himself there. And the one behind him, if he didn't react quick enough, the Tomcat's turning ability in that certain circumstance, it has those variable sweep wings that are so iconic. The wings move in and out depending on its airspeed and other things. And so that ability is extremely advantageous for the Tomcat because it can act like a close quarters fighter or be extremely fast, and depending on the circumstance. Okay, I'm getting into the weeds, but basically at the end there, you've got the fight between the two of them. It was freaking awesome. The Tomcat rightly won, vindicated. No, I'm just kidding. And it was great. The only complaint I have about the general combat is that flares are apparently shields, and they just the film made it look like when missiles hit flares, they explode or something. Like flares are not for shielding anything. Flares are for fooling IR missiles to believe that that is the engine instead of your actual engine, because they glow really bright, hot. They're really hot, so they look like, in an ideal circumstance, they'll look like an engine to an IR missile. They don't work that well in any generation. And that's to say also that they certainly don't work like a curtain that just block missiles from coming in to shoot you by exploding them or something, which is what it made it feel like. But anyway, that's to say, combat was easily, I would say, 20 times better overall in terms of conceptualization, in terms of filming, in terms of choreography. You got so many sexy shots. Everything was like 20 times better than this original film in terms of the actual action. And honestly, that's the film. Like, I mean, that's where the heart is of these films, is having your hokey, heroic character kick butt in awesome, sexy machines. That's the point of these films. And in that sense, it is a much better film than this film, like overall, just because of that. It's at least really entertaining in that sense. A few last things. One thing that bothered me is the trailer had all of the best shots in it. And yeah, that kind of, I was like, okay, this is a taste. So I was expecting to go in and find some more breathtaking shots. Unfortunately, I had seen the trailer, and those shots are still breathtaking to see on the big screen of the vapor trails on the F-18s, like all that stuff, the low-level flying. But it irked me that they gave away their best stuff in the trailer. I was looking forward to just more, but that was actually the best stuff that they strung together in their trailer. Not to say it wasn't great, but it was still great. And the other thing is Miles, I forget his last name, the actor who plays Rooster, who's also the main character in Whiplash. Fun fact: he kicked butt. He kicked everyone's butt in this film. Like, I was watching him act, and I was like, why are you doing so well in this hokey blockbuster movie? Why are there complexities in your actions and your emotions? And why are you trying to get an Oscar out of this film? This is stupid, He did a phenomenal job. As always, everything I've seen him in, he's just kills it. In Whiplash, he's phenomenal. Just brought a lot of texture to a character that wasn't given enough screen time, in my opinion. I would have even gone as far to say, if I were a director and my actor is eating it up like that, and I'm on a blockbuster movie where the script is kind of the secondary thing, in this case, I might have just rewritten him to be in more scenes, like as much as I possibly could, because he was just so mesmerizing to watch, whether he's in the cockpit or on the ground, interacting with people. That's something that I wish was more in there. Okay, that's my review of Top Gun Maverick. Let me know what you think if you see it in the comments. I definitely would recommend seeing it if you just want to have some fun thing to see in the theaters. It was better than I expected, and for sure. I was expecting it to be probably average. I think it could have leaned into the original spirit a lot better and been a little bit more summery fun, brought color back into it, and I think Tom Cruise's character could have been fleshed out better. But overall, I don't think it's rises to a guilty pleasure if you want to go see it, right? So if you want to go see it, have at it and have some fun. Any final thoughts about it, Ben, since you saw it as well?
I think I wrote literally exactly that, what you said word for word on our Discord. I said it was better than I expected it to be, given what I've heard about the quality of the original film. I mean, no great work of art, but like, in contrast, I think you asked me about Tick, Tick, Boom earlier. I think Tick, Tick, Boom is probably a better artistic statement in some ways, but I honestly enjoyed watching it more than I enjoyed watching Tick, Tick, Boom. Like, it's enjoyable, even though it's not like the best enjoyable film I've ever seen. But
yeah, I would agree with that. I think I gave Tick, Tick. I think I did a whole segment on it. I have complex feelings about that film. Phenomenal concept, in my opinion. But like Tick, Tick, Boom is like, it's just not the same kind of thing. So it's like, when you see something like Tick, Tick, Boom, you want it to be mind blowing because it's going for that. And then when you see something like Top Gun Maverick, you don't care if it's mind blowing. You just want to have fun, And so if it gives you that sort of that fun time, then yeah, it's a good time, regardless. I mean, I gave this film a 2 out of 5. I gave Top Gun, the original Top Gun, a 2 out of 5, but I would pop it in any day over like a lot of films that I've given higher scores, because to me, this is sort of like a more like a ridiculous subjective aspect of a movie like this that's sort of iconic, and that's okay. I think that's fine. Like, we can have mediocre fun films. It's okay. Yeah, I think Roger Ebert talks about that concept a lot. Which after Nathan mentioned him, I started reading some of his thoughts on film, and I was like, he's kind of a clone of my thoughts. I had no idea. He's really cool. So yeah, he says much the same stuff about blockbuster films, real quick. So if you've been listening to this was Mixed Media Movies, and we will be talking about some music next. So if you want to check that out, that'll be probably the next thing that comes up in your sub box. So please subscribe, like, comment, all the things I'm supposed to tell you to do. Do those things. Be a good citizen. Do those things, and we'll see you in the next show. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. Like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We back, man, you never gonna like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm more righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone vipers. No need for the telephone vipers.